Several more interesting names have entered the list for potential Atlanta Braves managers, including Kurt Suzuki and George Lombard. We'll talk about those two specifically and more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching us on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. And if you're listening on the audio version, you can help out as well. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Pretty much every episode in the offseason is going to be live, so you got an opportunity to join me live here like CJ Palmer and PJ's Braves. So thank you so much for being here on today's episode, where we're going to talk about some under-the-radar managerial candidates that have popped up on the list here recently. You know, when the job was first announced, or even going back when we first were talking about it during the season, we, talked about the David Ross, the Skip Schumacher, the Walt Weiss, all of those, but now you're seeing that list start to broaden a little bit. And there's some names on here that are very, very intriguing. So we'll get into all of that on today's episode and the report that the Braves have already given the okay from their current coaches to seek other positions. So that's a very interesting comment. We'll talk about that later in the episode, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Well, as I said, I want to talk about some more under-the-radar coaching names that have popped up on lists here recently, and two names that, not that I've been hearing from sources, but just out there in the universe lately, are Kurt Suzuki and George Lombard. And credit to a lot of you on the George Lombard, thought process of bringing him in. Many of you mentioned him in the comment section or on social media. And really, the more I go into it, and we'll do so here in a second, I think he's up there for me as one of my favorites. But let's talk about Kurt Suzuki first, because I feel like he was the big name mentioned on Tuesday. 42-year-old former catcher, 16 years in the big leagues, 7 with Oakland, 4 with the Nationals, 3 with the Twins, 2 with the Braves, and 2 with the Angels. Made an all-star appearance, won a World Series in 2019 with the Nationals. As I mentioned, a catcher, and the trope in baseball, catchers end up making pretty good managers. He's been a special assistant with the Angels for the past 3 seasons, and they have their own job opening right now that I'm sure he'll be part of that discussion. No coaching or managerial experience, which really hurts me liking Kurt Suzuki as a potential manager. A highly respected player all around baseball. We saw that here when he was with the Braves. And I think maybe there are some people that are hoping he goes the path of a Stephen Vogt, who went straight from, playing into coaching and has had a lot of success with the Guardians, but I'm just not willing to take that risk. It sounds like Kurt could be getting interviews with the Angels, Twins, and Giants. We at least know that he's being interviewed by the Giants. So we'll see if he actually gets that opportunity. Look, somebody's got to get that first opportunity. My biggest thing is experience. I want somebody with experience, but all great managers had to get that first shot somewhere. It's just, maybe this is just the old school part of me. I don't love this new age process of a baseball player retires, they go straight into managing. I still like the grind of, you got to figure it out. You got to coach at the minor leagues. Maybe don't have to go the Snitker route where you're there for 40 years before you finally get a chance to manage. But I don't know. Again, maybe this is just old school yelling at the clouds type of thinking for me. But I still like for my manager to have to go through the grind a little bit of coaching and getting that experience in the minors, managing over at least an entire professional minor league season. And, that's kind of why I'm not as high on Mark DeRosa as others, who he could be a great manager one day, but his only real experience is a handful of games in the World Baseball Classic. And for Kurt Suzuki, it's basically nothing. So I like the guy. I think he could be a good manager. It's just not for me. I don't think he's the right fit for the Braves right now. And it's not that he's necessarily high on anybody's list, but he was mentioned in an article posted by Britt from The Athletic the other day, and David O'Brien, quote tweeted that, saying Kurt Suzuki mentioned for the Angels jobs, Giants jobs, all that, but he said he also thinks he could be a fit or at least get a shot as an interview with the Braves job. And maybe he does, but I just don't think he's the right fit for the Braves. Not enough experience, or really just any experience as a manager. I think this group needs a proven leader. And as much as I loved Kurt Suzuki when he was with the Braves, I really, really did, I don't remember him being that fiery guy. And I think the Braves kind of need that at this moment. But the other guy I want to talk about today is George Lombard, 50 years old, drafted by the Braves in the second round in 1994 from Atlanta, was actually a running back that was committed to go play for Georgia before going pro. 6 years in the big league, so not nearly as much time spent as a big leaguer. However, 16 years overall professionally from 1994 to 2009. He's coached, been a coordinator in the minors a few times, including in the Braves farm system. Hasn't coached in the Braves farm system, but a coordinator. Was a first base coach for the Dodgers from 2016 to 2020, so has that big league experience. Interviewed for the Pirates job in 2019, interviewed for the Tigers job in 2020, didn't get it. AJ Hinch did, but ultimately became part of that staff there. He's been a bench coach for the Tigers on AJ Hinch's staff for the past 5 seasons now, currently in the playoffs right now with them. Like I said, interviewed for a few managerial jobs in the past, including last offseason as well. I know at least the Marlins job he interviewed for, at least according to Google AI, he's known as a great player development type of coach. And that's also corroborated by the fact that his son is right now the 25th ranked prospect in all of baseball and a first round pick by the Yankees. So clearly there was some good development there. Now, would he be the right fit for the Braves? Potentially, yes. Potentially, I think he could be a great fit for the Atlanta Braves. He doesn't quite meet all the criteria that I talked about earlier in this week or last week, whenever I gave my qualifications for being the Braves manager, in part that he doesn't have that experience as a big league manager, but he has been a big league coach for the past 10 years, and that is really good experience at the big league level. So even though he has managed in the past in the minor league, so that is definitely really good experience. And he's from the area, he's from Atlanta, obviously ties to the Braves, being drafted by the Braves, playing for the Braves, and he's been in the organization, but he's far enough removed from it and from this regime that it would still be an outside voice. Because one of my things too for the Atlanta Braves is I want them to get an outside voice. I don't want them to just do the rinse and repeat. Oh, you're part of the Brian Snitker lineage, part of the Bobby Cox lineage. Not that that's gone poorly. Brian Snitker was a great manager, did great things. Freddie Gonzalez, maybe not so much, but I just want something different, and I want an outside voice. And I think it's best of both worlds if you get somebody that's been part of the organization before, knows the Braves way, but they have plenty of other experiences outside of the Atlanta Braves organization. I think David Ross fits that too, as somebody that he's been with the Braves. He knows that organization, how it works, but he's got plenty of other experiences outside of the organization. So for that, I think that's a huge plus for George here. And especially when you consider the teams that he was with. He was with the Dodgers for 5 years, they are the best organization in baseball right now. And he's been with the Tigers for the last 5 years to help them turn things around. And not only that, he was been with AJ Hinch, who was there for the turnaround of the Astros and built them into a perennial contender. So he has been on some great coaching staffs, and he's been part of some really good organizations, some winning teams. And that's, great experiences and great organizations. And to bring that back to an organization that you're already familiar with, I think that could be great. And the other thing too, like I mentioned, not so much with Kurt Suzuki, but he has put in the work. He started in the minor leagues. He built his way up, and now he's been a major league coach for the last 10 years. So he has grinded it out to get to this point where he probably is deserving of getting that shot as a manager. And at 50 years old, he's somebody that could be here a while. I mean, he's somebody, if it takes, and he is the real deal, he helps this core get back on track and get back in the postseason, win in the postseason. He's somebody that could be here for the next 10 years. And so I think that's great as well. So there's a lot of positives, I think, with just the resume of George Lombard Sr. I don't know enough about him personality-wise, if he's going to be that fiery energy type of guy, which is second. That was the last qualification on my list. That's not a necessity for me ahead of some of the other things that I've mentioned. I don't know necessarily what type of manager he is. Is he more old school oriented? Is he more new school? Is he a good mix of both? But like I said, he's been with some really good organizations in the Dodgers and then the Tigers, but subsequently the Astros through AJ Hinch, that I think he probably has a good handle on how to build a winning team and how to coach a winning team. So this is one I didn't know a lot about going in. Again, a couple of people had mentioned him to me, but as I do some digging on him, I think I'm going to do my top three probably on Thursday. I'm going to do my top three managerial choices of who I want. And I think he's going to be in my top three, especially if you can somehow, get him to get the Yankees to trade his son over to the Braves. I think that could be a great win as well. But I'm really coming around on the George Lombard idea. So let me know what you think in the comment section below on either of those guys, Kurt Suzuki or George Lombard. Next, I'll get into some other off-the-wall names, some that I'm not quite as excited about. We'll get into those names here next. The NFL season is here, and the MLB postseason, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel allows you to bet the way that you like with player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game just a little bit more exciting, whether you're watching your team or you're hate watching like a lot of us are doing in the postseason right now, trying to make sure that the Phillies don't come back and win, trying to make sure that the Dodgers don't win it all, the Yankees. There's a lot of hate watching going on right now, but things are looking pretty good on the American League side. The Blue Jays all over the Yankees at the moment. You can see those odds out there. They got the latest World Series odds, series leaders right now, all kinds of stuff that you can see and props that you can see out there. The World Series favorite is still the Los Angeles Dodgers, followed by the Mariners and the Blue Jays at the moment. And again, you can see all that right there on FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/play-safe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thanks as always for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. We'll be getting caught up with everything happening in the postseason right now and any coaching changes happening around Major League Baseball. There's a lot of coaching managerial openings this offseason, so there'll be a lot going on there. Like I said, later this week here on the podcast, assuming there's no breaking news, I plan on Thursday, I'll give my top three managerial candidates, and then on Friday we'll have our mailbag episodes to get your questions ready for that. I want to get into some other names, some more off-the-wall names that are being brought up to me, and as well as some of your thoughts as well. I asked you who some of the under-the-radar names would be or are for you right now for the Braves managerial opening, so I'll read those off here in a second. But one that keeps coming up a lot that I just don't get is Tony Vitello, coach, whatever, of the Tennessee Volunteers. And it's a name that just keeps coming up, that I keep getting a lot of people mentioning as a possibility for the Braves. And maybe I feel like it's a little bit more common in football to see a head coach go straight from head coaching college to head coaching NFL and vice versa. I don't know. I don't follow football that closely, but I do feel like it's more common there. I don't know that it's that common in baseball. Again, I'm sure it's happened. I don't know of it happening in baseball. Somebody who's a head coach of a college baseball team just going straight to being a manager of a Major League Baseball team. Like, I know coaches have made that jump to like a pitching coach or something, and then maybe eventually into a manager. I can't think of any examples of that in my life. So Again, I'm sure there's some out there that I'm missing, but that alone would seem very, very odd to me. Not saying he couldn't do it. He's obviously done a fantastic job at Tennessee. I just think it's also very different versions of the game from college to the major leagues. And they are getting more similar with the NIL stuff. It's pretty much making college athletics professional athletics. So I think the gap is closing there, but it's still a very different game. And you look at it money-wise, you can make just as much money as a head coach in the SEC as you can in Major League Baseball. I mean, Tony Vitello making around $3 million a year at Tennessee. Brian Snitker was making around $4 million a year. And I can almost guarantee you that the Volunteers can match not whatever, but pretty much anything a Major League team's going to throw at him money-wise. Craig Counsell of the Cubs makes the most right now at $8 million a year. Shout out to Pat Murphy and the Brewers. I mean, it's not that much difference money-wise, and there's good money to be had in the SEC. Like I said, I think Tennessee could fork over more if they needed to, and that's a program in Tennessee right now that is humming, and it's in contention to win a College World Series every year. Now, he did turn that thing around very quickly, and I think it's a lot of credit to him, and he's had a lot of great talent come through there that's gone on to the big leagues. I think he could be a great manager. I would just be shocked beyond shocked if the Braves take a Braves with a core ready to win right now, takes a college head coach and makes them their manager. As PJ's Braves said, 60 games versus 162. It is a very different game. And I would just be shocked. So that name keeps coming up a lot. I think it's because I think initially there were some indications that maybe the Giants were looking at Tony Vitello. The other thing, too, is you don't follow college baseball very closely. You love Tony Vitello if he's your coach. You absolutely hate him and root against him if he is not your coach. He is one of those guys where you just can't stand him unless he is coaching for you, where all he does is win. I don't know if that type of fire and energy, for one, translates from the college game to the major league game. I know the major league game's gotten more flamboyant with its celebrations and all of that, but I still don't know if you hadn't followed Tennessee baseball the last several years and Tony Vitello, it is a different kind of energy. And I just don't know how that flows into the Braves way or whatever you want to call it. I don't know how that flows over to the major leagues and if you can keep that up for 162. So that's something that I question about Tony Vitello as a big league manager. Another name that people have asked me about is Travis d'Arnaud. Travis d'Arnaud is still under contract with the Los Angeles Angels, unless I missed something. Now, he very well could decide to step away, but I really doubt. And I think Travis d'Arnaud, if he were to step away, I would love for him to be, part of the Braves coaching staff, but not a manager, not right away. I doubt they're really going to take a guy who just decided to retire and then make them the manager. I do think Travis d'Arnaud is going to make a good coach one day. And like I said, I hope he does find his way to the Braves organization somehow when he does call it quits, if it is this year. But I don't think that's a realistic option for 2026. And then another one, which I've actually seen come up in the chat here a couple of times, Better Day saying Yadi Molina. This is probably just a personal take for me, is that I just never liked Yadi as a player. I just didn't. And I have a hard time seeing him in an Atlanta Braves uniform. I have a hard time seeing in anything other than a Cardinals uniform myself. I think Yadi, I wouldn't be surprised if Pujols gets the job with the Angels. Would not be surprised if Yadi is part of that staff and then he waits till the Cardinals job comes available and he becomes the next Cardinals manager. That's what I think the path is for Yadi Molina, is that he's a bench coach or something until the Cardinals job becomes available. I don't see him taking any other head coaching job until the Cardinals job becomes available, and he at least gets an audition for that. But I definitely don't see him managing the Braves anytime soon. I wanted to get to some of your thoughts as well. Josh Daniels says Maddox. I don't think he's in the market for that. Bobby Davis says Tony Vitello, I'm an Auburn fan, not going to lie. He makes me upset when we play Tennessee, but the energy he would bring to the team definitely needs energy, would be amazing. I think it's worth the risk. It would be risky because, like I said, I don't know that level of energy. I don't know that Major League Baseball is ready for it, and I don't know if you can keep that up over 162. Like if you've been missing all the ejections from Brian Snitker or just anybody in Braves managerial spot since Bobby Cox left, Tony Vitello would get them for you. C-Mac says, I think they may try to steal a vote from the Guardians. That would be an interesting one. I doubt he's going anywhere. SCW says, I'm all in on George. Lombard, I'm getting there with you. Noel Rodriguez says Javi Lopez. I don't think Javi's into coaching. VA Brace says Brian McCann. I've had a couple other people say Brian McCann. At least from what I've seen when he's retired, he seems like more of a reserved guy. Even when they've had him on the broadcast, he just seems like more of a reserved guy. Also don't know that he has that much interest in coaching. Richard Gregg says Kurt Suzuki. JD03 says Kyle Hudson, third base coach for the Red Sox. That's one I haven't looked into. Caleb Cook says Tony V. Michael says Eric Young. That's an interesting one. I would hope at least EY gets, and I don't know the Angels coach situation. I know Ron Washington's not going back, but I haven't heard what's happening. I'm assuming that that staff is being dismantled too. So I haven't really heard what's happened with EY. If you know, let me know in the comment section down below. But I would hope that he maybe at least gets an interview or a talk to. Then Jordan Watley with Travis d'Arnaud. Jordan, maybe you're the one I was thinking of earlier. I just don't see that happening. He is currently under contract with the Angels right now. Matthew Sweatman says Charlie Culberson. I love me some Charlie Culberson. I don't think he's quite managerial material. But again, he's somebody that would love to see in the Braves organization. AJ Evans says, just say no to Dusty Baker. Yeah, as far as like the old managers go, like Bruce Bochy, Dusty Baker, even Bob Melvin, guys like that. I could see it if you just wanted to finish off this core and you wanted to have that big experience to try to finish off this core for the next 3-4 years with an experienced guy that's been there, done that. But I'm more on board with, getting that guy that could be here a while, somebody in their mid 50s, 60s, somebody that has, 10 years in them. JRL6 says is Chipper off the books. As a manager, yes, but I'm going to get to the somewhat news here in a second about the current coaching staff for the Braves. I think there's a good chance that Chipper Jones might be your hitting coach next year. PJ says Dusty is asleep by 6 p.m. these days. I think Dusty and Bochy themselves just probably need to hang it up. PJ also says McCann can get fired up for Carlos Gomez. I've never been more fired up than I was for that moment. I love that moment and always will for Brian McCann. Andrew Chandler says, I saw a list somewhere that had Don Mattingly. Yeah, I've seen that list too. And we talked about Don Mattingly a little bit when he gave out the initial list of managers. I don't hate it. I know he's one of those guys, as Braves fans, did not get along with him at all when he was with the Marlins, but I think he could be a good manager and, has that experience, a little bit older, probably is more of the old school type. And I'd like somebody that's a little bit of a blend. All right, next we'll get into the news that I was hinting at about the Atlanta Braves telling their coaching staff that they are free. If they want to interview for other jobs, they are free to do so. We'll talk about that here next.
Fellas, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Go Long. Because Go Long combines 2 doctor-trusted medications in one dual-action formula so you can both get hard and go the distance. It's a game changer for confidence. The effects can last up to 36 hours, which is confidence both all day and all night, and even into the next day. Super simple process, 100% online. You connect with a board-certified doctor, and if prescribed, your treatment ships discreetly right to your door. So if you're ready to level up your confidence in the bedroom, head to Rugiet, RUGIET.com, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for 15% off your first order. That's Rugiet, RUGIET.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Make sure to use our code so they know we sent you.
Well, it was reported in that Athletic article that I talked about earlier, written by Britt. She said the Braves have given their coaches permission to interview for other jobs, which is a bit significant, meaning that we may have a whole new coaching staff next year. Now, as I said, when the decision came down for Brian Snitker to step down and not come back, I said there's a few guys on the coaching staff that I want to keep, and everybody else, it is what it is. Rick Kranitz, the pitching coach, would love to have him back. Think he's done a fantastic job. I would like to keep Walt Weiss around as a bench coach. I don't hate that. But the only other one really for me is Eddie Perez. Would love to keep that guy around, but he probably deserves, and I think this is probably more what it was for, is for there are so many managerial openings that Walt Weiss probably deserves to look somewhere. I doubt it, but maybe Freddie Gonzalez gets an interview somewhere. And Eddie Perez, more so just Walt and Eddie Perez, Walt Weiss and Eddie Perez, I think probably get some looks as managers elsewhere. And so I think that was probably more about telling guys, hey, there's a lot of managerial openings out there. You get a call, you want to interview for one of these, by all means, go for it. I think it was probably more so of that than, hey, Tim Hires, you want to go look to be a hitting coach somewhere else, go do so. I think it was probably more so about the guys who might get looks as managers to say that they're open to, go seek that. I doubt, maybe secretly, that they're hoping that Tim Hires does move on. Maybe not so much because of him, but more so that they can bring in Chipper Jones. But I thought that report was kind of interesting that AA's already told these guys, hey, you got permission to look for other jobs, which means whoever they're looking to hire, I think it maybe leads more credence to the possibility that it is going to be somebody outside of the organization, that it's not going to be a Walt Weiss, it's not going to be an Eddie Perez, that it's probably going to be somebody outside of the organization. Double A says, does Cranny even want a manager job? I don't know that Cranny does, but he would certainly be one of the most sought after pitching coaches if made available. And, again, I think only one job right now has been locked up with the Rangers and Skip Schumacher. But, if Schumacher, I don't know if they have any relationship, just hypothetically here, if he were to call up Cranny and Cranny's just looking for something different, he doesn't know the coach that's coming in here and he wants to make a change, then by, all rights, I think he has the right to do that. And that's kind of what this says, is that he does. So no, I don't think Cranny necessarily for a manager, but I think there'll definitely be some new managers that are looking at him for a pitching coach position. And so I think it's also partly key why you make a move pretty soon. And I know Alex said he just started the search on Saturday, so we're just still in the beginning processes. It's probably at least going to be another couple of weeks before we get a decision. But I do think it's important that you make that decision before a lot of other managerial decisions get made, so you know what to do with the coaching staff that you have. Because, like I said, I would love to keep Cranny on board. I'd love to keep Eddie Perez. So I think it is important that you make that decision before a lot of the other decisions get made. It'd be interesting to see, though, what happens. Obviously, you pick a new manager. They're going to want to try to hire the guys that they want for coaches. What happens with the hitting coach? Do you move on from Tim Hires? Do you try to, whoever the new manager is, say, hey, would you be cool with Chipper coming on board as the hitting coach? But we'll see how all of that plays out in the weeks to unfold. But I just thought that was very interesting that AA pretty much, or did say, tell the coaches, hey, you're free to go look for other opportunities. As far as the quick postseason update, the Mariners took a 2-1 series lead over the Tigers. The Blue Jays, it looked like they were going to run right through the Yankees, but the Yankees made a big comeback here on Tuesday night. It's 8-6 right now in the end of the fifth inning as I'm recording this. So come on, Blue Jays. Interesting too, if the Yankees already get swept here, is Aaron Boone back as the manager? Could he all of a sudden be a managerial candidate? Could there be a big manager spot open? That might be something to keep an eye on if they get a quick dismissal here. In the National League, the Brewers hold a 2-0 lead over the Cubs, and the Dodgers hold a 2-0 lead over the Phillies as that one shifts to LA. So that's what's happening in the postseason right now. Yes, PJ's Yankees do have the lead. They're up 8-6 on the Blue Jays, trying to stay in that one, but it is just the fifth inning right now. Thank you so much for joining me here on today's episode of Locked On Braves. Josh Daniels, PJ's Braves, Matthew Sweatman. Appreciate you all being here. Andrew Chandler, AA, Kinzu Knight. Thank you all. JR, L6, Stephen P. Appreciate you joining today's episode of Locked On Braves. AA, Frankie Torres, AJ Evans. Appreciate all your support. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Make sure you hit the thumbs up button as well. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. And I did want to get to one more. Josh Daniels said, how many years does A have on his contract, or is it fluid? Just a quick Google search here. Alex Anthopoulos' current contract is an extension with the Braves that runs through the 2031 season. So he is under contract for quite a while, but those things can change. I think this is an important year for Alex Anthopoulos, important off season and the direction of the team, but also his standing with his job. I think this is going to really dictate maybe even what his legacy is here with the Braves, how the managerial hire goes, how the offseason goes, and how next season goes. I think it's going to determine a lot about Alex Anthopoulos' future with the Braves. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.